So I'm here this morning. It's 12 o'clock in the UK and 7 o'clock in Montreal, not New York, isn't it? I'm with Irene Becker. Good afternoon. Good morning.
Toronto.
Toronto. I'm not even in the... See, I'm rock and roll. I don't know even where I am or who I am. But anyway, I am here with Irene to talk about 3Q leadership and leadership in general. But particularly, first of all, I'd like to sort of ask you how you got to become sort of a leadership coach. So tell me your background story from birth onwards or wherever you want to start.
Well, I think the place to start would be the era in which I grew up, where there was a lot of discrimination against women wanting careers. And it was a completely different epoch where I wondered as a young child, about leadership strengths, about why there was a difference, about why I couldn't lead, about what I could do to learn faster and take charge. And I discovered I was on a path. I was a teacher of special ed kids, left the profession to work for a while and decide what I wanted to do. And my father took ill and died in a 3-week period. And he left me a steel business and $580,000 worth of debts, which was a heavy load in the late 80s. I was told by 3 lawyers to pack it in. You can't run a steel business. This is impossible. But my father had been my best friend, my mentor, tutor, and I was determined. So against all odds, I built the business to 90% market saturation in Canada. Worked in France, the UK, the United States, did a lot of trailblazing things in the business community and also in the community in general, because I believe wholeheartedly in our ability and our responsibility as leaders to give back. 17 years ago, I had taken time off I'd taken 4 years off to be with my kids. And I came back to Canada after being the victim of a crime, and I started with $100 and a credit card and a prayer. And I went from a net worth of millions to cleaning toilets to support my kids. So I had this drastic change that was again and against all odds story. But I believe, and I will never stop believing, that with courage, faith, hope, wisdom, integrity, you can surmount anything. And I was determined to show that to my kids. So when we got settled, I was working, I requalified in another profession. I was working as a financial planner. And I found coaching, or it found me. I did a certification in coaching, then one in coaching emotional intelligence. And out of my experience with clients all over the world, I began to realize that there's not an IQ lack, there's an EQ lack, emotional intelligence. We need to master our ability to increase self-awareness, master our emotions, understand the emotions of others, and all those things that also feed into communication. However, there were 2 other cues that I discovered at the worst of times. IQ and SQ. We need to be able to optimize ideation, cognitive ability, our ability to think in change when you're in an arena of change challenges. So that's the first cue. EQ is the second cue, and SQ is the third cue: spiritual quotient, purpose, values, integrity, intrinsic motivators. I began a journey over 10 years to develop 3Q as a model, because I believe that all the Qs work together to make us smarter, to make us faster, to make us more productive, and most importantly today, to make us more effective. Because we've come full circle. I think, 100 years ago, efficiency was the litmus test of success. Controlling the mode of production was where it is at. For a lot of organizations, we are now entering the age of innovation. We need to be able to ideate, to create, to collaborate. It's the human spirit. It's knowledge applied that really counts. And in order to do that, we need to build all three areas.
Mm.
But we need to do it, yeah.
You've mentioned this kind of epiphany of being dropped down a hole and
Oh,
getting
yeah.
out of it. I mean, not
Mm.
everyone has access to that, and then you have intellectualized it, you've analyzed it and come up with this model as well. And I've got a copy of it here. But I mean, I doubt that when you were down the ditch with the $580 million bill, that you probably just did it naturally, and then you've moved back through unconscious competence back to working out.
Well, I think that I don't know that I did it unconsciously, quite frankly, because I'm a thinker, and I was determined. I mean, my SQ piece, my values, my purpose have always guided me. And I had a focus on paying back the debts, continuing my father's business, and I just would not relent.
We lost a little bit of you just there, Irene. When you started to answer my question, I thought I'd lost you completely.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so come back again a little bit with that. Sorry about that.
Part of it, you know what? I believe that part of it was an intrinsic gift to be able to deal with challenges. But another part of it was the fact that I'm a thinker. And I stepped back and I thought, what do I need to develop to succeed? And I mean, ironically, at that time, I was the most visible minority, Peter. I didn't look like a round, blonde, middle-aged woman. I looked like a hot babe when I was young. It was the wrong look. It was the steel business, the wrong industry.
Look, I've still got the wrong look. And
But I've got to tell you what it did for me, though.
Yeah, sure.
It taught me how to communicate across barriers.
Hmm.
How do you develop trust? How do you build rapport? How do you lead when you're immediately discounted? It was a huge skill builder.
But there's been several occasions in your life when you've been dropped into a business where you had to work across boundaries. And what you've done with 3Q leadership is to sort of give people a framework and a model, a flexible framework to think about this. I'm going to put it up now and ask you to sort of take us through some of this, because we lost you slightly when I think I swore during the time that I couldn't hear you, thinking that this won't be on the video. But unfortunately, viewers, there is a swear word earlier on. But anyway, here we have the 3Q model. Perhaps you would sort of walk us through it a bit.
Okay, I did a specialization in coaching emotional intelligence, which I believe in with all my heart. And out of that came another model that added in 2 more Q factors. What's different about building 3Q is we're talking about not only recognizing your strengths and playing to them, but shifting your relationship with change, challenges, and failures so that you're optimizing a strength, but you're also using a change, a challenge, a stressor, or a failure to build each of these areas.
That's unusually different, isn't it? Because steady state leadership, when things are going well, is pretty easy. But the test of a leader is when something goes wrong or indeed even fails. And you're dealing with that, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's a passion because at an individual, an organizational, and a social level, Peter, the wave of change is not going to stop. People who say that there's nothing different today, we could open a whole debate about that. The velocity of change is tremendous. It impacts all of us, and it impacts us negatively because we're primarily wired to be on search for predators and to resist change. The caveat there is that today we know that our brains are neuroplastic. You can rewrite a habit of thinking, a habit of doing, a habit of communicating. And what I'm talking about here is optimizing your potential by rewriting the script, by starting to use changes, challenges, even failures to increase cognition, ideation, focus, strategic thought, even our ability to learn and relearn. Q number 2, EQ, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, awareness of others, communication, collaboration. Also, risk tolerancy and resiliency. We need to become like springs. The question will be, well, in this world of incredible change, what can we count on? Q3, which is to me the anchor of all, spiritual quotient, purpose, integrity, values, and the building intrinsic motivators. Because no matter what changes in our world, success is about creating value for others. Whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in a business, whether it's in an organization. And if there is no integrity, if there are no values, if the SQ piece isn't strong, you're destined to burn and crash. And our ability to hang on to really build Q3 is critical, because like the reason I have wheels on the picture is all the wheels go together, and it doesn't have to be complex. When I'm working with a client or a team, as soon as we do a small shift in how you deal with a change or a challenge, that small shift repeated rewrites the neural pathway, and it has a ripple effect, so that not only does it help you think smarter, not only does it help you emotionally, whether it's dealing with your own emotions, dealing with the emotions of others, working across a cultural or generational gap, building communication and collaboration, those pieces come together. So all the three Qs work synergistically, and I really believe that they're critical. And it's my mission to take 3Q to as many people and organizations as I can. Because I think that what's happening now, we're living in times of extraordinary paradox. We can talk about a VUCA world, volatility, uncertainty, change, ambiguity. What that does is it automatically puts our primal wiring into the fear state. What we know is that when you're afraid, your cognition is limited, you don't optimize your potential. We need to stop talking about VUCA and start talking about what we can do, how we can lead, communicate, and succeed forward at the speed of change in the faces of challenges, and how we can use our failures to fail forward.
Yes. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about the model, which is up for everyone to see here.
Sure.
I'm not asking them from my point of view because, as you know, I've got an MBA, so I reflect, I intellectualize things. I'm also a rock and roller, so I use intuition and reflection to sort of learn. So you've sort of sold it to me. But I do meet regularly people who only have one of the three Qs. You know, they're perhaps an economist or a hard-driven business person that has maximized their grades at school and perhaps hasn't bothered with the other two. And particularly, I think a lot of bankers and people would say EQ. I get that. But you know, the cynic or the skeptic might say, well, what's the difference between spiritual Q and EQ then? You know, what, I mean, I get it, but take just contrast the difference of why someone says, well, I think I'm very intelligent conventionally. I see the need for communication and a bit of EQ, but spiritual stuff, it sounds like sitting on a mountain with a pipe. So take me through that.
It does, but it's not. Spiritual quotient is about values, integrity, purpose. It's about also building habits that put your brain into an alpha state. Critical state. We now know that during prayer, during meditation, during chanting, some people experience it during exercise. Your brain, and during the sleep cycle, your brain goes into an alpha state. It's like a spa vacation for the mind, a high state of creativity, builds resiliency, cognition. When you're tapping into SQ, you're alpha state. SQ is not EQ. SQ is what will drive you when the chips are down, when everything is stressful, when the rug is pulled out from under you. What keeps you going as a leader, Peter? It's your commitment. It's your integrity. It's your purpose. And we need to build intrinsic motivators at every level in organizations, because times are not going to get easier. And if we don't have that piece, and I mean, not everyone, you're going to ask everyone, like somebody once asked me about coaching, and I recently did a couple of articles on emotional intelligence for a medical school journal, and I recently did one for graduate medical students. And one of the questions the journalist asked me is, what makes someone coachable? Desire. If you're talking with somebody whom you described, who wants to build the other two Qs, who sees its importance,
Yeah.
you have a field of growth in front of you. If somebody is closed off, if the desire is not there.
Absolutely. I mean, I do get it. And I think the links for me, I think I sometimes learn things very well when I'm playing music in a flow. I think the concept of flow matters around the SQ part. I think mindfulness is
all the cues.
Yeah, but mindfulness is another popular term that sits somewhere in this whole area, which is becoming more understood by people. And I think, I often, access those sorts of states in the oddest of places. But the trick move is to access them normally, I guess, when you're actually working on your job, as it were.
But you know what? You're a brilliant man with brilliant books and brilliant work who's obviously very whole-brained, because you have the linear side and you have the musical side, and it's a wonderful combination. But what you said about accessing those states, when people say to me, I don't have time.
Yeah.
I'm the gal who's gone from millions to cleaning toilets.
Yeah.
I know about multiple jobs not having time. I like what I call cool tools. They take less than 5 minutes a day and they work, and you can do them anywhere.
Yeah.
You can find, I had a list that I put up. I can publish it again. I think there were like 50 or 100 under 5-minute tools that will help you build the cues. Like what you're talking about, accessing that state or putting your brain in an alpha state, doing that 3 times a day for a couple of minutes is a game changer and a life changer.
We'll eventually obviously develop an article that sits alongside this. And I was going to ask you at the end about links to things like articles and tools. So we'll embed them into the article. But I want to probe you one more level on the question of resiliency, on the EQ part of it. Because my maxim for resiliency is summed up by the Chumbawamba song. I get knocked down, I get up again. I don't know if you've had that in Toronto. But actually, Chumbawamba are wrong, because back without learning is a dangerous mistake, isn't it? So learning's the thing about resilience is, yes, of course, you get up again rather than going into a terrorized state for 10 years, but you get up having learned something. Is that what you're implying in that sort of resiliency model?
I think that you get up even stronger.
Yeah.
You get up being able to be adaptable. But the piece that doesn't adapt, the core, is the SQ piece. Values, purpose, integrity. Otherwise, building resiliency, to a certain extent, you can build resiliency in a culture like the UK with a stiff British upper lip. Or be a man, forge ahead. But inside people are crumbling. Inside people are crumbling. They're getting diseases. They're stressed. 300 billion, to take it to the other side of the pond, 300 billion is spent a year on workplace stress, Peter. 10 billion is spent on US executives, on addiction, stress-related problems, family. The World Health Organization says that stress will be the major cause of physical disability in the world by 2020, 2030. Depression, the #1 illness by 2020. We need the cues.
Well, you don't have to convince me on this point. I meet the people you're describing every day who are wound so tightly into their jobs. I had an experience of someone sort of almost, going into meltdown the other week when we were doing some work together. It wasn't work, it was musical work, but they were wound so tightly at work. In fact, they unwound when they met me because they thought I could release it.
Good.
So you don't have to convince me, and the cost of it is indeed immense, and it's not on a balance sheet, unfortunately, is it? And it should be.
But it will be, because what is the litmus test of success? It's human ingenuity today.
Yeah.
In the Western world, it's ideation, it's collaboration, it's communication, it's you can't have those things without the other two cues. You can't have those things when people are stressed out of their mind.
No, no, indeed.
They can have a stiff upper lip, but are they going to be? It's not a question of production, it's effective. We need to be effective.
Okay, on a daily basis, just coach it. What are you doing? You're working with individuals, groups, large groups?
I work with individuals. I work with individual clients. I work with teams. I work with large groups. I've had a really eclectic practice because I started my practice as a single mom who was passionate about coaching before content marketing. And I've always been a prolific writer. So people would take articles from my site with attribution, and I ended up with clients all over the world. But an eclectic group of clients, from CEOs down to entrepreneurs. So I think I've worked in just about every sector and multiple levels, from larger organizations to small organizations. What interests me is the potential of the individual I'm dealing with.
Okay.
And their desire to really grow. I work in the leadership sphere, communication. I also do career transition.
And you're bang on right, or it resonates with me at least, which means it's right. That's two of us. You're bang on right when you say that if people haven't got desire, you might as well just pack up and go home. And the trick move I try and find out is whether people actually want to make any change at all, without which, they're wasting their own time, let alone anyone else's. And I think you've hit the nail absolutely bang on the head there with desire.
Well, sometimes, I was working with a team in a different area, career transition, and we were discussing personality types. And there was one gentleman at the table who was a real introvert who was obsessed with his MBTI. He came to life during this workshop. He became one of the most extroverted people at the table. It was just wonderful to watch.
So sometimes you can light a fire if people really are stuck then.
But if you can't light a fire and if there's no desire, you can be the greatest consultant, coach, counselor, therapist. It doesn't matter what.
No, this is starting.
You can't light a fire with wet wood.
Well, this is starting to sound like a Bruce Springsteen song. Can't light a fire without desire. It sounds like a rock song. But anyway, I'm going to come back to sense because rather than my structure over here. Tell us how we get in touch with you, Irene, because I'm going to wrap the conversation up in a moment.
Okay, Peter. You can get in touch with me on Twitter at justcoachit, through my blog, 3Q Leadership blog, on the net, justcoachit.com, on Skype, Becker Irene. And if you Google Irene Just Coach It, there are many ways to get in touch with me.
There is, and there's only one competitor, the photographer Irene Becker.
I didn't know that.
There is.
That's so funny because I'm not photography. I love photography, but it's not my skill.
She's number 2 on Google. You're number 1.
Oh, okay, good to know.
It's been a great pleasure to talk to you about 3Q leadership coaching. I hope the technical glitches on this sound have not affected it too much. If it has affected it, we'll put it into the article that will accompany this video, in which it will be embedded to. So thank you so much, Irene.
You are so welcome. I thank you, Peter. Have a great day.
And you.